African Americans in that race. I mean, he got pummeled. I think he lost by 30-something points. And at that time, he's doing a lot of fundraising among what they call in Chicago the lakefront liberals, a lot of wealthy whites north of Hyde Park. And I think he started to realize that he had this sort of appeal to people beyond just his South Side base. And at the very least, that if he could put a coalition, a sort of black, white, liberal coalition together, that would be a sort of natural base for him.
And eventually, then, he's able to get his Senate district redrawn in the reapportionment to actually include much more of downtown Chicago and the wealthy areas of the city.
Yeah, no, he got very lucky. He almost left politics after he lost that race in 2000 to Bobby Rush. But everything after that turns his way. The Democrats in Illinois won the right to redistrict the state. And like all Democrats in Illinois, Obama was deeply involved with the redrawing of his own district. In fact, one day in the spring of 2001, he sat down at a computer with sophisticated mapping software and began the process of redrawing his own district. And his district changed in fundamental ways after that. He used to represent just an area in the south of Chicago that went east-west. His district changed. It now pointed north. It was a north-south district, and it included a huge chunk of downtown Chicago, including the famous Loop, which is the big business district, the Gold Coast, almost all of the Chicago lakefront. He represented now all the museums, all the finest shopping areas of downtown Chicago, as well as his original Hyde Park base. So it was a very, very different district. It became whiter, it became wealthier, it became more white-collar, it became more Jewish, and it had one of the highest concentrations of Republicans in Chicago. And the folks that lived and worked in that district now would be the important donors for his U.S. Senate campaign that he started to run for in 2002. So it was a big dramatic change, and that redistricting really was a huge turning point in Obama's political career. The other thing that it did, besides the fact that his constituents now were so much different, the overall goal of redistricting in Illinois was to take back the state Senate for the Democrats. They gerrymandered the state. And they accomplished that in 2002. So after 2002, Barack Obama, who had been a state senator since January of 1997, in the minority, where he couldn't get much done, he's now a state senator in the majority. And that allowed him to actually get some things passed and get all of the things passed that he would then use as a platform for his 2004 Senate campaign. So that redistricting was incredibly important to his political career. I think you could make an argument that without that redistricting, he may not have been a real contender in that U.S. Senate race.
And finally, Ryan Lizza, I'd like to talk a little bit about that famous anti-war rally where Obama constantly refers to when he first took a stand against the Iraq or the looming possibility of a war in Iraq while other political candidates did not. But you talk about the rally and specifically what he said at that rally and how calculated he was even then in the political message he was sending out.
Look, you have to remember, Obama was from Hyde Park. It's one of the most liberal state Senate districts in Illinois. He could have been as left-wing, as liberal as he wanted, but he wasn't. He was always, and there are various reasons he wasn't. I think genuinely he was a little to the right of some of his constituents, but I also believe that he had his eye on higher office and he was careful not to be pigeonholed as too far out on the left. And his speech at the anti-war rally is a good example of that. And just like redistricting, I think you can argue that if he hadn't opposed the war in Iraq, he would not have been a plausible presidential candidate, because that was the key distinction, of course, with Hillary Clinton. But the speech was not what you might call a typical anti-war speech. He started off by talking about wars that he supported. The Civil War. He talked in almost glorious terms about the Civil War and World War II. Now, nobody opposes the Civil War and World War II, so they're not exactly the riskiest things to support. But he was in front of a pretty, partially pacifist crowd, and it is an anti-war rally, and he was very careful to point out that where he disagreed with folks in that crowd. In other words, he was trying to push off the left a little bit. He was trying not to be defined as strictly an anti-war candidate. At the same time, he made if you read it today, it still stands up very well. He made a very powerful case against the Iraq War at a time when a lot of Democrats weren't doing that. But there were certainly some politics in mind. And if you talk to some of the people who were in that audience that day, one of the common things you hear is, wow, this guy is not just talking to us. He's talking to some he's talking to either some statewide or national crowd. This speech seems pointed seems more like for the history books than just for us here at this anti-war rally. And this comes up throughout Obama's political history. He often had his eye on the next rung of the ladder, if you know what I mean.
Well, Ryan Lizza, I want to thank you very much for being with us. Ryan Lizza is the political correspondent for the New Yorker magazine. His article is called Making It, How Chicago Shaped Obama. It's a fascinating read. When we come back, excerpts from Friday's historic House Judiciary Committee hearings on impeachment. Stay with us.